is that you are watching a system implode. You are watching American capitalism desperate. Our government and the very person leading it are symptomatic of all of this. But the policies are so self destructive that you can see the decline of an empire in the desperate gestural way all of this is being done under a slogan of making America first, whereas the reality is America is running in the opposite direction and making good progress getting there.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the What the Finance podcast. On this episode, I have the pleasure of welcoming back Professor Richard Wolff. Richard is well known, sort of looking at alternative economic systems. He's the host of the Economic Update and founding director of Democracy at Work. So, Richard, thanks so much for coming back on the podcast.
Glad to be here, Anthony.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to the conversation because, as you're saying just before we got on the call, it seems like there is lots of volatility, lots of crises, things are not going well economically. But I'd really like to sort of take a step back and just hear what do you currently see in the economy?
Okay. Many of us in the United States, not just those of us who are professional economists, or for that matter, professors of economics and so on, many other people, a much broader group, are coming more and more to the conclusion that we don't just have economic problems, we don't just have difficulties, we don't just have issues, that we now face a full-blown systemic problem or set of problems that are interacting and aggravating one another. And it's that which has become the central focus or theme, if you like, of our discussions, both public and private. So let me go through a few of them to convey not only the particular points, but some of the spirit of discussion here. So we begin with a central fact, crucial to everything, which is that the United States, over the 20th century, now 25 years behind us, was a period of time in which, at least in the United States, we congratulated ourselves on having overcome class divisions. And by that was generally meant that we were a huge, vast, successfully middle-class society. Yes, we had a few people very wealthy for historical reasons or because they were great actresses or whatever. And we had a few very poor people, that's true, but they were marginal. And what was the core of the United States was a vast middle class, which had an enviable standard of living, had its own home in most cases, its own automobile or more than one, the ability to send children to college, university, to take a vacation, a whole lot of signs of a vast middle. So that, for example, in the 60s and 70s, it was very common to read yet another article or read yet another book or hear yet another politician or business leader give a speech on the 4th of July, our Independence Day, about what a fantastic success we were, how exceptional the United States was, and it was this big, vast middle class that was proof positive that we were the success that led us to congratulate ourselves in that way. Well, for the last 40 years, as every statistical series maintained either by the government or by universities or by private statistical services will attest, we have destroyed that middle class. We are now a society not only split between the rich and everybody else, and by the rich, I mean the top 10% and everybody else, but we are riven by the consciousness of it all. That is, it's on everyone's mind. It is obvious. I'll give you just one of countless examples. In the last few weeks, we have finally passed the governmental budget for the coming years, and the one that President Trump called a big, beautiful bill. Well, I won't bore you with the details. It's a bill that's many hundreds of pages long. But the bottom line of that bill, which is what has mostly drawn public attention, is that it perpetuates tax cuts passed initially in the first presidency of Mr. Trump, back in the declining weeks of 2017. Those were supposed to expire at the end of this year. The new bill perpetuates them, cancels their expiration, and adds a whole new set of additional tax cuts, overwhelmingly for corporations and the richest 10%. And this at a time when the United States' deficit, and I want to remind everyone that the United States is the world's largest debtor country right now, and is adding right now to that debt by the trillions with a T annually, and that this new bill will continue doing that for the next decade unless it is amended. This is an extraordinarily deep division in our society, producing all the things that unequal distributions of wealth always produce: bitterness, regret, envy, hostility, and I mean that from the rich towards those falling below them, and among the mass at the bottom looking up at the rich. This is a country that therefore has cheered the disintegration of Elon Musk and his position, because he exemplified literally in himself the extraordinary wealth that existed, and that can, when it self-destructs, bring cheers from those who are mere spectators. Number two, the effort of this government to deal with a debt problem that is already very scary. Our national debt is much above our GDP, but trying to deal with the fact that it is this government currently making the deficit of this already over-indebted country even worse, seeking to offset some of that by imposing tariffs, and then you have to take a deep breath, on everyone else in the world. And as I am taking a breath, it is extraordinary. The problems of the United States, the president says, are going to be solved by hurting or hoping to hurt every other country. Because a tariff, if you understand the economics of it, a tariff is paid first and foremost by an American importing company. That is who gets billed for the tariff. Our leaders are fond of referring to tariffs as the tariff on China, or the tariff on the EU, or the tariff on Britain. But the tariff is not on them. That is a carefully designed political misspeaking. The tariff is paid by an American importing corporation. Now, of course, that corporation will do everything in its power to handle the tariff cost the way it handles every other cost that arises, by either passing it on to the final consumer in a higher price, which would then mean inflation in the United States, or going back to the country from which the imports come and begging them to lower their prices and to thereby help the importing company make that tariff payment that Uncle Sam requires. In other words, squeeze the American consumer or squeeze the rest of the world in order to help the United States. That's what this program is. And what it has done is break, in an important way, the entire post-World War II global political alignment. It is now well known that some of the worst hurt by all this are our closest allies. The deal made with Japan last week, the threats hanging over the relationship between the United States on the one hand and its two major trading partners, Canada and Mexico, on the other. These are now destroyed alliances. Canadians are not taking their tourist time in the United States the way they once did. The damage to them, the damage to the American tourism industry, incalculable and growing as I speak to you. A broken set of alignments and alliances at the same time that the United States wants to mobilize those same countries to join it in tilting against the other new power block in the world economy, which is the People's Republic of China and the careful alliances it is building around the BRICS countries. This is a self-contradictory program. Those alliances are being strained to the breaking point. They're not being strengthened. It's the opposite that's happening to them. That's why the EU is having meetings with the Chinese. That's why the Canadians are working overtime to find Chinese markets for what they used to send to the United States, and on and on and on. These are unspeakable self-destructions. And I'll give you one last example. I don't want to speak too long at one time. I'm going to give you the example of the electric vehicle. 20 years ago, 15 years ago, a competition emerged. And it was a competition in which virtually all of the world's automobile companies participated. It had to do with the transition from fossil fuel run automobiles, petroleum, gasoline, and all of that, and the transition to electrically powered vehicles, cars and trucks. Okay, at the end of the last 15 years, there's a clear winner, which the whole world that pays attention to these things knows. And the winner are the Chinese. They've done the best job of developing the highest quality and the lowest price of electric vehicle, in particular, the BYD Corporation. How has the United States coped with having lost that competition to the BYD Corporation in the classic way of a loser. It has erected a tariff wall against Chinese electric vehicles. It began under Mr. Trump, 25% or so. It was raised under President Biden to 100%. And let me now finish this point by telling you how and why that is a self-destructive act of the United States. Here's what it means. Every American company that needs either cars or trucks as inputs to whatever it does cannot afford to buy a Chinese electric vehicle, even though it is the best quality at the lowest price. So, for example, if it costs $30,000, an American company buying that truck or hoping to would have to come up with $30,000 to pay the Chinese to ship the truck or the car, and then would have to pay Uncle Sam the tariff, 100%, another $30,000. And so the total cost to the American company is $60,000 for something as fundamental as a car or a truck. The American company won't do it. It will settle for a Tesla or a Toyota or a Ford or a General Motors. They also have electric cars and trucks, but they are of a lower quality than the BYD, and they will cost the American $40,000 to $50,000. That means, and here's the punchline, that every competitor of the United States who also needs to buy cars and trucks and who is also engaged in the transition from fossil fuel to electric vehicle, everyone else in the world can and is buying BYD cars and trucks for $30,000, whereas the American competitor has to settle for a poorer quality car or truck and pay significantly more for it. And you know what that means? That is a competitive dead end or death sentence, if you like, for the United States across the board. Protecting the producers of electric cars in the United States by a tariff against BYD has as its price the loss of many more jobs across the economy of the United States. Final point. Why would all of these things be happening? Why would there not be steps taken to go in exactly the opposite directions? And the answer to that is that you are watching a system implode. You are watching American capitalism desperate. Our government and the very person leading it are symptomatic of all of this. But the policies are so self-destructive that you can see the decline of an empire in the desperate, gestural way all of this is being done under a slogan of making America first, whereas the reality is America is running in the opposite direction and making good progress getting there.
Yeah, thanks so much for going into really in-depth analysis of what's happening. Are you concerned that it seems like things are escalating, continuing to escalate, especially with, people, as you said, people are upset. There is the destruction of the middle class, sort of there's the haves and have-nots. Do you think there's potential for there to be, I guess, violence in communities? Because it does seem,
Yeah.
in the UK said that, and it seems to be, things are on a knife edge. At least that's how it seems.
Not only is there a potential to be violence, but you can already see the violence. I'll give you again 2 or 3 little examples, and there are countless more of them. We have a new police department in this country. It's called the Immigration, and I don't actually know what the initials stand for, but it is well known in our country as ICE, ICE. It is an entirely new police force. It is legally empowered and very well funded by the federal government, the Trump administration, to collect ostensibly immigrants without adequate papers and to hold them and then to deport them. And it is doing it for the last 4 or 5 months in increasingly visible, violent ways. So much so that the population of this country is beginning, contrary to the goals of the Trump administration, to turn against the whole spectacle. It has been so violent, arresting children, deporting people to horrific imprisonment conditions, their crime having been to immigrate and to not, at least not yet, have the right papers. The claim that they only arrest people who have committed other crimes has been shown to be false so often that you can get clearly now the idea that there's a terrorization process underway. That's what they're for. The violence is part of getting immigrants to leave the country even before they are snatched off the street by these police. And to show you how grim it is the law in the United States that all of the regular police must have a badge visible with their number and must show their face. ICE is allowed to wear masks, so you cannot identify the particular member of the police who has abused you or your children or your loved one. So we already have violence. And why against the immigrant? Are they the cause of the economic problems I just went through with you? Of course not. Beating up on immigrants is a scapegoat game. It is the traditional scapegoat of desperate political leaders. The foreigner in our midst. The fact that this country has grown big and strong by having welcomed immigrants for 150 years, having needed the immigrants because they slaughtered the native people that were here. All of that is pushed aside to demonize some of the poorest people on earth as they come to the United States, because they actually took seriously what it says on the Statue of Liberty, bring me your poor, you're hungry, and so forth. So we already have it. But there's more. There's definitely more coming. Let me give you an example. The rage of the mass of people who have been pushed out of the middle class and down into the precarious working class finds a remarkable object for its anger in the Jeffrey Epstein case, which is now front page news every day here in the United States as I speak to you. Why would that be? Because it's sexual inappropriate? We have loads of that. We don't need another. And another one wouldn't attract that much attention. We have, sadly, too much of it. No. Here the important thing is Mr. Epstein was a millionaire many times over, and he collected many other millionaires, including President Trump, including previous President Clinton, including the President of Israel, Barak, including, and I could fill in the blank. This is sexual predation on young men and women by the richest people in the world. And the masses want it exposed. They want to see it. They want it out in the open because they are angry, very angry. We are a very violent country, as I'm sure you know. Americans have more guns than anybody. And our culture allows guns to be carried and shown and brandished in public. So we are right on the edge of an explosion of violence for which we are now being prepared by watching ICE not only commit violence, but provoke immigrant communities to self-protect by using the same violence, which hasn't happened much yet, but is our next step down the road that this kind of economic decline often provokes.
And what do you think needs to change to sort of resolve this decline that we've seen or to reverse what we've seen?
I think we have to have a break with the last 75 years. I was born in Ohio, right in the middle of the United States. I've lived and worked in the United States all of my adult life. I've been a professor of economics. I've been active across the country. We are a society that has had the worst taboo I can think of against asking a simple question. Might the problems we have something to do, A, with the capitalist system, and B, with the empire that the United States created out of the decline of the British Empire early in the 20th century? In other words, to what extent are our problems systemic and therefore need a discussion of capitalism, its strengths, which it has, its weaknesses, which it has, and then the great question, can we do better? Only a healthy society would dare do it, and only an unhealthy society would taboo against it. We are having problems which we don't know how to solve because the particular solutions for particular problems no longer work. We are at a point of systemic dysfunction, and that requires a systemic conversation. And that's where we are politically. There are some forces, and they are growing, and they are already strong, that are ready, willing, and determined to talk about capitalism as just another system that needs to be interrogated and to which the response must be created to this question. Can we do better than the capitalism we're living in? And I can assure you that if not a majority, already a large minority of Americans are answering that question with a yes. And the only qualification to yes is that we need to think about the successes and failures of other efforts to go beyond capitalism as we fashion our own.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much for running us through. So, do you see? I know in New York, there's sort of a election coming up, and there's a potential they say of a socialist member becoming not the governor, but the mayor. Do you think that this is going to continue throughout? Or I guess the challenge is it could go either left or right depending on the area. And
yes, it is going in both. It's going in both those directions. Zoran Mamdani here in New York City is likely to be now the next mayor. He is a socialist. He is a Muslim. He is not white. He's all the things that an enormous number of Americans now feel are like them. And it's those same ones who feel very deeply alienated from the Tweedledum, Tweedledee Republican Democrat oscillation of who is going to mismanage this country. That's how people feel. That's why they voted for Mr. Mamdani. And that's why they're going to do it again. But he's not the only one. We have been watching this process unfold since Bernie Sanders first ran back in the election of 2016. We are watching Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez become an important politician. She also carries the label of socialist. You have Mr. Mamdani. There is a mayoral candidate quite like him who looks likely to win in Minneapolis, a major city in the Midwest of the United States. The direction of change is unmistakable. Nobody can miss it. The right wing had its time and peaked with Mr. Trump because he is not changing anything. He's actually making the inequality of wealth distribution worse, as I tried to outline in my answer to your first question, talking about the new budget. So the more and more people are recognizing Mr. Trump is no different. He too went on that airplane to Slave Island with Mr. Epstein, cavorting in sexually horrific ways with the other rich people gathered there. So it's now the turn of the left. Let's see, the mass of people are saying, whether the left critique can do a better job of making for real change now that the right critique has shown it cannot do that. That's the power of what's happening and why the left is on the march. And not just in the United States, but if I understand correctly, Mr. Corbyn and Ms. Sultana are doing something similar in Britain.
Yeah, great. So, Professor Wolff, thanks so much for coming on today. Really appreciate your time. My last question is, what is one message you want people to take away from our conversation?
I want them to understand that we in the United States are reacting, hopefully with thought and with care, to a fundamental change in the world economy. The dominance of the West, which traces back, if you wish, to the Renaissance, or if you don't wish, to the modern transition from feudalism to capitalism, and then the spread of capitalism until it became global. That is now changing. If you add up the GDP of the G7, the United States and its major allies, including Britain, it works out to 28, maybe 29% of total global output. If you add up the GDP of the People's Republic of China and its BRICS allies, it works out to 35% of the world's GDP. The world isn't the dominance of the West economically. Just like the Ukraine war is teaching that it isn't under the control of the West militarily either. We have to adjust to that change. We cannot stop it and we cannot repress it. And the effort to do so is a disaster for everyone, even shy of the nuclear war. That's what we're all reacting to, not just as countries. Every company is reassessing its global strategy, if it has one, to take account of the changing world. You know, that's the issue. We are learning the lesson. And as with all great changes historically, and even all great moments of crisis, they are also moments of opportunity to use the crisis to make the changes that it shows us we need for our own survival, let alone our own progress.
Yeah, great message. So thank you so much for coming back on. Really appreciate it. I'm sure everyone's going to be, very informed about our conversation and understand more about where everything's going. So if anyone wanted to find out more about your work and what you do, where would the best place for that be?
The easiest thing is our organization is called Democracy at Work. You can find us on Substack. You can find us on the internet. I do a weekly half-hour economic program on radio and television and on the YouTube called Economic Update. But the best way is go to democracyatwork.info, and from there it'll take you to all the different things. We publish books, we produce videos, and you can see the scope of our work.
Great. I'll put those below, but thanks again for your time.
Thank you again, Anthony.
Hey everyone, thank you for listening. I really appreciate the support. If you've got value out of this, I'd really appreciate it if you could like, subscribe, or comment, good or bad feedback. I'm always open to that. But it really helps with the channel. As I said before, only about 14% of people actually subscribe to this channel. So if you were to that, it would really help. It could mean we could continue to grow. If not, thanks for watching and see you on the next show. And you also might like this video right here. All right, thanks again.